The world will tell you a story, a comfortable story, a story of meaning found in another, of completion through union, of a love that conquers all. It's a lullaby sung from the cradle, echoed in every song, every film, every whispered promise under a moonlit sky. But what if that story is a magnificent deception? Arthur Schopenhauer, a name that, for many, conjures images of a grim prophet, a purveyor of pessimism. But perhaps he was simply a man who refused to be soothed by the lullaby. He was the cartographer of disillusionment, the philosopher who dared to pull back the velvet curtain on the grand theater of human existence, revealing not divine purpose, but a relentless, blind, and utterly indifferent mechanism. There's a moment, isn't there? A hairline fracture in the edifice of your most cherished beliefs, a flicker of doubt in the face of overwhelming societal consensus. You look at the altar upon which you've sacrificed so much, companionship, romance, the dream of a soulmate, and a cold whisper asks, "For what?" Schopenhauer didn't just hear that whisper. He amplified it into a symphony of uncomfortable truths. He stared into the abyss of human desire, not with fear, but with the unwavering gaze of a surgeon determined to dissect the ailment. To him, what we call romance wasn't the pinnacle of human experience. It was nature's most elaborate con, a biological imperative dressed in borrowed finery. The intoxicating dance of courtship, a prelude to servitude, the sacred bond of love, a carefully laid snare by the will to life, that insatiable cosmic striving that uses us as its unthinking pawns. What society paints as a masterpiece of connection, Schopenhauer exposed as a primitive drive, artfully camouflaged. What you perceive as your unique, profound feeling for another, he saw as the species whispering its ancient agenda through your heart, indifferent to your personal peace. The chasm Schopenhauer identified between man and woman wasn't merely anatomical, it was elemental. Man, he posited, is driven by the abstract, the intellectual, the grand pursuit of ideals, the shaping of thought, and the construction of civilizations. His gaze is fixed on the horizon of potential. Woman, in his stark assessment, is the guardian of the immediate, the concrete, the primal instinct for continuation. Her genius, he argued, lies not in the ethereal realms of philosophy or art, but in the pragmatic, unwavering service to the species. Women, he notoriously wrote, are by nature meant to obey. Not an endorsement of subjugation, but a brutal observation of what he saw as inherent predispositions forged by eons of evolutionary pressure. They are, in his view, perpetually grounded, mistaking the transient for the eternal, the surface for the substance. And beauty, that quality that launches fleets and topples empires. Schopenhauer saw it not as a divine spark, but as nature's most potent anesthetic, a biological lure perfectly engineered to bypass a man's reason, to cloud his judgment, to make him forget his higher aspirations and bend his knee to the altar of procreation. He argued that a woman's beauty is not a gift, freely given, but a strategic weapon designed to disarm, to captivate, and ultimately to enlist the man in nature's ongoing project. And history, if we are honest, bears witness. How many titans of intellect, builders of nations, visionaries who touched the sublime, have found their grand designs derailed, their energies diverted, their very essence diluted by the pursuit of a connection they believed would elevate them, but instead tethered them. Lacking, in Schopenhauer's view, the physical dominance or the inclination for grand, abstract construction, woman cultivated a different arsenal, the power of influence, of subtle manipulation, of emotional leverage. Her domain was not the battlefield of nations, but the intimate theater of the home, the heart, the desires of men. Men might dream up the empires, but women, through their perceived needs, their charm, their very presence, shaped the men who dreamt. And we call this exchange love. We write poems about it, sing its praises, build monuments to its supposed sanctity. But Schopenhauer tears away the sentimentality. He calls it what he sees, a transaction cloaked in verse, a biological contract sealed with illusory vows. The will to life, he proclaimed, this blind, insatiable force, cares nothing for your individual happiness, your spiritual growth, your quest for truth. It cares only for replication. And to achieve this, it floods your senses with mirages, whispers sweet nothings to your soul, convinces you that this time, this person is the answer. By the time the drug wears off, the chains are already fastened. Marriage in this bleak landscape is not the sacred union it purports to be. It is the final, irreversible act of surrender, a legally binding contract that formalizes a man's capitulation to nature's agenda. Once ensnared by the siren song of beauty and the promise of fulfillment, the man, Schopenhauer argued, ceases to be his own master. He becomes a provider, a protector, yes, but of what? Often of a structure that drains his vitality, silences his inner voice, and replaces his grand ambitions with the mundane rhythm of obligation. He toils, he sacrifices, he compromises, not for some noble ideal, but to maintain a domestic arrangement that, once the initial enchantment fades, can become a gilded cage of quiet desperation. The vast expanses of freedom he once knew, the freedom to think without compromise, to create without distraction, to pursue truth relentlessly, are bartered away for a perceived security, a fleeting comfort. Schopenhauer's words cut like a razor. To marry is to have your rights and double your duties. The allure of a woman's smile, the promise of intimacy. These are the bait. Beneath lies the hook of instinct, of repetition, of the species' relentless drive. This isn't a misogynistic tirade, though many have dismissed it as such. It's a diagnostic report. He saw women not as malicious conspirators, but as unconscious instruments of this grand, indifferent will. Their primary aim, dictated by their biological programming, is security, the perpetuation of their lineage. To achieve this, nature endowed them with an intuitive mastery of emotional terrain, a realm where logic often falters, and where men, driven by what they believe to be higher reason, are often outmaneuvered. Men enter this arena armed with syllogisms, while the rules of engagement are written in the language of instinct and feeling. And so, the man often becomes a tragic figure in this drama. He builds the fortress, only to find himself a guest within its walls. He dedicates his life's work, only to see its fruits consumed by demands he never consciously agreed to. His dreams, once soaring eagles, become domesticated pigeons, content with scattered crumbs. And the bitterest irony, he often tells himself this is maturity, this is responsibility, this is love. But deep within, a forgotten self whispers of unexplored continents, of unwritten symphonies, of a path abandoned. Schopenhauer's aim was not to incite hatred, but to shatter illusion, to force men to confront the often unseen forces that shape their destinies. His philosophy is a stark warning. It is not woman who is man's ultimate undoing, but man's ignorance of these dynamics, his romanticized idealism, his failure to decode the true language of attraction and its often staggering cost to his individual sovereignty. The tragedy, then, is not that men love, but that they love with their eyes wide shut, that they trade their authentic selves for a prepackaged ideal of happiness, that they mistake the siren call of instinct for the voice of destiny. And when the mirage dissolves, they are left not just with a broken heart, but with a fractured sense of self, a life lived in service to an unexamined script. Schopenhauer's genius was his unflinching honesty. He peeled away the layers of societal conditioning, of romantic sentiment, and laid bare the raw, impersonal machinery of nature. He saw men not as inherently flawed, but as tragically vulnerable to their own deepest longings. Men, he observed, are capable of monumental achievements. They are the architects of civilizations, the explorers of the cosmos, the composers of eternal melodies, the seekers of ultimate truths. Yet all this intellectual and creative firepower, this capacity for transcendence, can be brought to ruin by the unchecked allure of the instinctual. Once a man falls under this spell, he subtly, almost imperceptibly, begins to recalibrate his life. His mission, once his pole star, now shares its orbit with the needs, real or perceived, of another. His uncompromising principles may soften, eroded by the desire for harmony, for approval. His very identity can morph, becoming a curated version designed for palatability rather than authenticity. And in this gradual surrender, he loses the one thing that is truly his, himself. This, for Schopenhauer, is the ultimate betrayal, not of another, not of society, but of one's own potential, one's own truth. What becomes of the man who has forgotten the sound of his own voice? What fire remains when the pursuit of truth is traded for the pursuit of validation? He observed that many men are not defeated by external foes or material hardship, but by the slow, sweet poison of emotional dependency, by the illusion of salvation found in another. And here, women, often unconsciously, wield their power, not through force, but through the subtle, pervasive influence of presence, of expectation, of unspoken needs. They do not typically demand sacrifice. Men offer it willingly, often eagerly, on the altar of perceived love. And so the erosion begins. First, the time dedicated to his craft, then the solitude that once nurtured his deepest insights, then the intellectual rigor, perhaps, blunted by the desire to avoid conflict. Pillar by pillar, the edifice of his independent self crumbles, until the man who once stood as a sovereign entity now finds himself defined by his relationships, his obligations. His purpose shifts from creation to maintenance, his joy from discovery to appeasement. Society applauds this transformation, labeling it settling down, maturity, commitment. But Schopenhauer compels us to ask the forbidden question: what if this isn't growth, but a profound, tragic diminution? What if the man who relinquishes his individual fire isn't evolving, but slowly extinguishing? The man who awakens to these Schopenhauerian truths doesn't necessarily retreat into bitter misogyny. Instead, he cultivates a profound understanding of these natural forces. He doesn't reject connection, but he approaches it with a new, steely-eyed clarity, recognizing its potential costs and its true nature. Above all, he fiercely guards the sanctity of his own soul, his own purpose, from being consumed by the very things that promise solace but often deliver distraction. This is not a summons to misanthropic isolation. It is a call to radical self-awareness, to step back from the intoxicating dance and ask, is this life a reflection of my deepest self, or a performance for an audience of one, or for society at large? Schopenhauer's voice, echoing across the centuries, is not one of condemnation but of urgent counsel. Reclaim yourself before the tides of instinct and societal expectation pull you under completely. In Schopenhauer's stark hierarchy, the most realized man is not the celebrated lover, nor the dutiful husband, nor even the valiant warrior. It is the philosopher, the one who sees the game, understands its rules, and chooses as much as possible to transcend it. The one who turns from the clamor of the marketplace, the seductions of the flesh, the applause of the crowd, and seeks instead the unshakable truth found in the citadel of his own mind. He believed that true freedom is born of detachment. Only by renouncing the illusion of ultimate fulfillment through another can a man truly encounter his own depths. He pointed to the solitary sages, the Stoic thinkers. the ascetics who walked their paths alone, not because they were incapable of love, but because they valued their inner peace, their intellectual sovereignty above the fleeting consolations of romantic entanglement. They pierced the veil of romanticism and chose the harder path of wisdom over warmth, of clarity over comfort. And in that solitude, Schopenhauer insists, lies an unassailable power, not power over others, but the profound power of self-possession. This path is undeniably austere. Most will recoil from it. Society will brand it as cold, as unnatural, as a bitter rejection of life's sweetest offerings. But Schopenhauer wasn't writing for the crowd. He was writing for the few, for those who have tasted the ashes of illusion, for those whose souls bear the scars of romantic disillusionment and now hunger for something more substantial than fleeting emotion. Not comfort, not validation, but unvarnished truth. And that truth, stripped bare, is this: a man who does not understand the tempestuous sea of his own desires will be forever tossed by its waves. A man who does not comprehend the fundamental, often unacknowledged, dynamics at play in his interactions with the opposite sex will remain perpetually vulnerable. And a man who constructs his identity upon the shifting sands of romantic promises will inevitably watch it crumble. Schopenhauer's challenge reverberates today. Are you truly awake, captain of your own soul? Or are you merely a character in a dream scripted by nature and society? This isn't an argument against love, but a call to redefine it, to love your own mind, to love your unique purpose, to love the profound stillness where truth whispers when the noise of the world finally fades. Because the man who can find contentment in his own company, who feels no gnawing lack, no desperate ache for external completion, that is the man who cannot be easily manipulated, the man who walks in genuine freedom. So, if these words resonate, if they stir an uncomfortable recognition deep within you, do not turn away. Sit with that discomfort. Let it be the alchemist's fire that burns away the dross of comforting lies, of inherited illusions. Let it strip away the false selves you've adopted in the pursuit of acceptance or fleeting pleasure. You were not meant for a life of quiet compromise, a slow fade into the wallpaper of someone else's expectations. You were meant to see with unclouded eyes, to walk your own path, even if it means walking it alone for a time. To rise, not because you are bidden, but because you remember the untamed fire within. Let Schopenhauer's fierce clarity be your mirror, not to foster bitterness towards the world, but to empower you to navigate its complexities with wisdom and discernment. Once your eyes are truly opened, the world never looks the same again. If this exploration has sparked something within you, if it's challenged your perceptions or offered a new lens through which to view your life, don't let the conversation end here. Like this video, share it with others who might be ready to hear these uncomfortable truths. Subscribe for more content that dares to dive deep beyond the surface-level narratives. And if you feel a kinship with this mission, if you believe in the power of these challenging ideas, consider supporting the channel through membership or the links in the description. Your support is what allows these vital conversations to continue and to reach those who are searching.